You worked until you were 55. You handed in your badge, cleaned out your locker, and then you did the one thing every retirement checklist on the internet tells you to do. You rolled your 401k into an IRA. And in that one afternoon of paperwork, you gave back the right to touch your own money without a penalty for the next 4.5 years. That is not a hypothetical, friend. There's a man who retired from Home Depot in the year he turned 55. He moved his 401k into a traditional IRA at Vanguard. 2 years later, at 57, he pulled $37,000 out of it to keep his house up and his lights on. The IRS sent him a bill for $3,694, on top of the income tax he'd already paid on that money. He took it to tax court. He lost. The case is Catania versus Commissioner, decided March of 2021, and I'll put the citation in the description so you can read the decision yourself tonight if you want to. Here's the part that stings. If he had left that money exactly where it was, sitting in the Home Depot 401k untouched, that bill would not exist. Same man, same money, same age, same withdrawal, different account. Now, if you've never heard of any of this, I want you to hear me clearly before we go one step further. You are not behind, and you are not foolish. You are completely normal. Nobody sits you down at 54 and explains that the container your money sits in matters as much as the money itself. The rollover form doesn't have a box on it asking whether you'll need this money before 59.5. This is one of those rules that's written in plain English in the tax code and somehow never makes it to anybody's kitchen table. And it is not a small group of people getting caught by it. A great many 401k accounts get rolled into IRAs every year in this country, and an awful lot of those happen more or less on autopilot in the first month or two after somebody walks out the door, when the letters are arriving and everything feels like it needs handling right now. So today, Ray is going to be the neighbor who finally walks you through it. Before we get into the substance, go ahead and tap that like button and subscribe so these retirement breakdowns keep finding you. That one click tells YouTube to put this video in front of somebody else who's about to sign rollover paperwork this month and has no idea what it costs them. Takes you a second, and it genuinely helps. And stay with me all the way to the end, because the last thing I'll walk you through is 4 questions to ask your plan administrator. 4. That's the whole list. And the answers to those 4 questions tell you whether any of this is available to you or not. Keep a pen handy for that part. All right, let's get into your money. People call this the Rule of 55. That name doesn't appear anywhere in the tax code. The actual home of it is Internal Revenue Code Section 72, subsection T. And the IRS publishes a plain English page listing every exception in that section, which is the easier place to look. I'll link it below, and I'd like you to go check every word I say today against it. Here's what it says in plain language. Normally, if you take money out of a retirement account before you turn 59.5, the IRS charges you a 10% additional tax. 10%, on top of the regular income tax you already owe on it. But there's a carve it. If you separate from service, retired, laid off, took a package, quit, the code doesn't care which. And that separation happens in or after the calendar year you turn 55, then distributions from that employer's plan are not subject to the 10%. Hear that again, friend, because there are 3 tripwires hidden inside that one sentence. Tripwire 1 is the calendar year, not your birthday, the year. The IRS states this test plainly in its own published guidance. The separation has to happen during or after the year you reach 55. So if you turn 55 in November and you walk out the door in March of that same year, you're in. You were 54 years old on your last day, and it does not matter. And notice which event the test looks at, the separation, not the withdrawal. There's a case the tax court decided in 2011 that shows what happens when those two come apart. A school teacher left her employer at 53. She left the money sitting in the plan, like a sensible person, and waited. She took a distribution at 55 and argued that she was 55 when she took the money, so the exception should cover her. The court disagreed. Taking the money at the right age does not fix a separation at the wrong age. Tripwire 2 is that employer's plan, not any plan you have, that one. Tripwire 3 is that the plan actually has to let you do it. We'll get to that one, and it's the one nobody sees coming. Now, Notice what is not on that list. Nothing about the stock market, nothing about how much you managed to save, nothing about interest rates. These are 3 pieces of paperwork, and paperwork is something you can actually control. Trap number 1, the rollover. This is the big one, and it's why we opened where we opened. The Rule of 55 lives in the part of the code that deals with qualified employer plans, 401ks, 403bs, the thrift savings plan if you're federal. It does not live in the IRA section. In fact, that same section of the code, just a few paragraphs further down, goes out of its way to say the separation from service exception does not apply to IRAs at all. That is not an oversight or a loophole somebody forgot to close. It is written in on purpose. Now, here's what people expect to happen. They expect the exception to follow the money. It's my retirement money. I earned it at that employer. I separated at 56. Surely the protection travels with the dollars into the IRA. It does not. The exception attaches to the account and to the separation event, not to the dollars. The moment those dollars land in an IRA, they are IRA dollars. And IRA dollars taken before 59.5 get the 10% unless some entirely different exception applies to them. That is exactly what the Home Depot retiree found out, 2 years too late. He didn't do anything reckless. He did the thing that gets recommended in nearly every article on the subject. And notice the ugly timing of it. Most rollovers happen in that first stretch after somebody leaves a job, when the plan is sending paperwork and a brokerage firm is offering a signing bonus and a nicer-looking website. The decision gets made in exactly the window when almost nobody has sat down and asked what it costs. Take a breath, friend. I know that's a lot of code sections for a Tuesday. You don't need to memorize any of them. You need one sentence. For someone who may need that money before 59.5, the exception only survives if the money stays in the plan. That's it. That's trap 1. Trap number 2. The accounts from jobs you left years ago. The exception applies to the plan of the employer you separated from. Just that one, not the collection. So picture this. You spent 12 years at a manufacturer, then 18 years somewhere else, and you retire from the second one in the year you turn 56. That second employer's 401k is covered. That first one, still sitting where you left it, not covered. Not even a little. You didn't separate from that employer in a qualifying year. You separated at 38. Now, here's a piece of this that runs the other way, and it's the part I'd want a neighbor to tell me. Plenty of plans accept incoming rollovers from other employer plans. So moving an old orphaned 401k into the plan you're about to retire from, while you still work there, can potentially bring that older money under the same roof before you separate. I want to be careful with how I say that, because I'm telling you how the rule works, not telling you to go do it. Whether a plan accepts roll-ins at all, and how it treats money that arrives that way, is entirely up to that plan's document. Some do, some don't. It's a question to ask, not an assumption to make. And there's a timing note buried in that. It's a question you ask while you still work there. Once you've separated, your options narrow considerably and quickly. Trap number 3. And this is the one that catches the people who did everything else right. The tax code says the IRS won't charge you the 10%. It does not say one word about your plan having to hand you the money on your terms. Every 401k in America runs on a plan document. That document decides how a former employee can take money out, and they vary enormously from one employer to the next. Some plans let you take whatever you want, whenever you want, more or less like a bank account. Some limit you to a set number of withdrawals per calendar year, 2 or 4. Some will only pay in installments on a schedule you set once and can't easily change. And some, this is the dangerous one, will let you take one distribution, and it has to be the entire balance. Think about what that means. You're 56. You've got, let's say, $600,000 in that plan. You need $40,000 of it to get through the year. And the plan says, full balance or nothing. Now you're holding $600,000 of ordinary income in a single tax year. The 10% penalty is gone. The rule of 55 did exactly what it promised. And you have walked straight into the top of the federal brackets, plus whatever your state takes, all of it landing in 1 year on money you meant to spread across the next decade and more. The penalty you avoided was 10%. The tax bill you triggered is a multiple of that. I know. Let me make it simple. There is one document that answers this question, and it's called the Summary Plan Description. Your plan is required to give you a copy. That's the whole defense against Trap 3. One document, one phone call. Now, here's where it gets really important, and I promise this next part changes how you think about all of it. Because there is something the rule of 55 does not do, and if you miss it, you can make a genuinely expensive mistake while following every single rule perfectly. The rule of 55 removes the 10% additional tax. That is all it removes. Every dollar you pull out of a traditional 401k is still ordinary income in the year you take it. It still lands on your 1040. It still stacks on top of any other income in the household, and it still counts toward the thresholds that decide how much of your Social Security gets taxed later on. There's one more, and this one only applies if you're getting close to 65. The income on your return, plus any tax-exempt interest, is what Social Security looks back at when it sets your Medicare Part B and Part D premiums. And that look-back runs 2 years. So the year you turn 63 is the year that sets your very first Medicare premiums at 65. If you're 56, that's not your problem yet. If you're 63, it is your problem right now. So somebody hears the words penalty-free, and their brain quietly translates it to free. Those are two very different words. Take $50,000 out of that plan at 56. The rule of 55 takes the 10% off. That's $5,000 you keep. What it does not touch is the ordinary income tax on all $50,000. And what that costs you depends entirely on what else is sitting on your return that year. If that withdrawal is most of your income, the tax underneath it may well land below the penalty you just avoided. But if you've got a pension coming in, or a spouse still working, filling up the lower brackets before your withdrawal even arrives, it can run well past it. Either way, it is the number nobody budgets for. Because penalty-free sounds like the whole story, and it's only part of it. Ray's rule of thumb here is short enough to remember. Penalty-free is not tax-free, and it never was. While we're here, one thing worth knowing if it applies to you, because it runs in your favor for once. If you worked for a state or local government and you have a governmental 457B plan, you are in a different situation entirely, and a better one. A governmental 457B isn't a qualified retirement plan for this purpose, and distributions from it are generally not subject to that 10% additional tax at any age. Not 59.5, not 55. There's no age test on it at all. But, and this is the same lesson wearing a different hat, money that got rolled into that 457 from a qualified plan keeps its original character, and a distribution attributable to that money can still carry the 10%, which is the theme of this whole video. Consolidating accounts feels tidy. Tidy is not the same thing as cheap. And quick reminder, friend, this is for education only, not tax or financial advice. Run your own numbers or sit down with a qualified professional before you make a move. Let me show you how this actually plays out on a kitchen table. Take a couple I'll call Frank and Diane. They're invented. I'm making them up so we can walk the arithmetic together. But every rule underneath them is real. Frank turns 55 in September. His plant announces a package in February, and he takes it, walking out the door in March. On his last day of work, Frank is still 54 years old. He separated in the calendar year he turns 55. He's in. His birthday hadn't happened yet, and it doesn't matter one bit. Frank has $480,000 in the plant's 401k. He's also got $90,000 sitting in an old 401k from a job he left at 41. And Diane has an IRA of her own. Frank plans to claim Social Security at 62. So his money has to carry him about 7 years, from the day he walks out to the day that first check arrives. Here's what Frank's paperwork looks like if he gets this right. The $480,000 stays exactly where it is. He does not roll it. He does not consolidate it. He does not move it somewhere with better fund choices. He leaves it in the plant's plan, and when the household needs money, that's where it comes from. The $90,000 from the job he left at 41 gets no protection at all, and never did. That one he can leave alone until 59 and a half, or roll to an IRA. Makes no difference to the penalty question either way, because it was never covered. Diane's IRA is Diane's IRA. Her age governs her account. Frank's separation has nothing to do with it. Now the part that makes or breaks the whole plan. Frank calls the plan administrator before he signs anything and asks what the plan actually permits for former employees. Let's say the answer comes back up to 4 partial distributions per calendar year. 4. That's workable. Frank takes about $50,000 a year, split into 2 withdrawals, spring and fall. 7 years of that is $350,000 against a $480,000 balance. No 10% penalty on any of it. Ordinary income tax on every dollar, which he knew about and planned around. Now run those same 7 years with one thing changed. Frank signs the rollover form in April because a brokerage offered him a bonus and the website looked friendlier than the plans did. It's the same money, the same man, the same 7 years. Every dollar he pulls before 59 and a half now carries the 10%, unless he sets up a substantially equal periodic payment schedule, which is a different exception with its own rules and its own video. At $50,000 a year for 4.5 years, call it $225,000 of withdrawals. That's roughly $22,500 of additional tax that did not have to exist. Same plan, same balance, one signature in April. Now, I want to be careful here because the point was never that rollovers are bad. For an awful lot of people, rolling a 401k into an IRA is a perfectly sound move, and there are real reasons for it. IRAs usually offer far more investment choices than a plan menu. Fees can be lower. Consolidating 4 scattered accounts into one makes life simpler for you and enormously simpler for whoever has to settle your estate someday. And IRAs allow qualified charitable distributions later on, which employer plans generally don't. There's even a real cost to staying in the plan that I'd be doing you a disservice not to mention. When a plan pays you a distribution that's eligible to be rolled over, 20% federal withholding is mandatory. The plan has to hold it back whether you want that or not. That doesn't apply to everything, mind you. Long-term installment payments and required minimum distributions are treated differently. But for ordinary withdrawals, staying in the plan can mean tying up cash you'll get back at tax time but don't have in hand right now. So picture somebody who retires at 56 with a pension and a paid-off house, and no intention of touching that 401k until required minimum distributions start, which is age 73 or snowy 5, depending on what year you were born. For that person, none of this changes the math. The exception was never going to get used. The rule of 55 matters in one specific situation. You separated in or after the year you turned 55, and there's a real chance you'll need that money before 59 and a half. If that's you, the rollover isn't a bad idea. It's a door that only opens one direction. You can always roll into an IRA at 59 and a half. You can't roll it back into the plan you just left. One more group, and if this is you, the numbers move in your favor. There's a companion provision in that same section of the code, written for what it calls qualified public safety employees. For that group, the age 55 gets replaced with, and I'm quoting the statute directly, age 50 or 25 years of service under the plan, whichever is earlier. 25 years of service at any age. If you started at 22 and you've got 25 years in, that trigger can reach you before your 50th birthday. That 25-year alternative came in with the Secure 2.0 Act at the end of 2022, and it applies to distributions made after that. The IRS spells out who counts. On the state and local side, it covers employees providing police protection, firefighting services, or emergency medical services, plus corrections officers and forensic security employees. On the federal side, the list runs from law enforcement officers and firefighters to Customs and Border Protection officers and air traffic controllers. There are several more specific federal categories beyond those, and the IRS page names every one of them. Private sector firefighters were added by Secure 2.0 as well. Two things to keep straight if that's you. First, this generally runs through governmental plans. A state pension, the thrift savings plan if you're federal. Second, and I'd wager this is the one that catches people, the rollover trap applies here too, and it applies 5 years earlier. An officer who retires at 50 and rolls a governmental plan into an IRA has just switched that 10% back on for the better part of a decade. If you're in one of those jobs, verify your specific category with your plan and against the IRS page on exceptions to the tax on early distributions. Some of these have precise statutory definitions, and the employment code your agency reports actually matters on your 1099-R. All right, let me put the whole thing in order, because the order is what you actually came here for. 1. What calendar year did you separate or will you separate from that employer? If it's the year you turn 55 or later, keep going. If it's earlier than that, this rule isn't yours, and no distribution date later on will fix it. 2. Is there any real chance you'll need money out of that plan before 59 and a half? If the answer is a confident no, the rest of this is optional for you. If it's yes or maybe, keep going. 3. What does the plan document allow for separated participants? Partial withdrawals? How many? How often? Or full balance only? This is where the whole thing lives or dies. 4. Only once you have the answer to number 3 does the question of moving anything anywhere become answerable. That's the order, and it's an easy order to run backwards because the rollover paperwork usually arrives first, long before anybody thinks to ask what the plan allows. Now, the 4 questions I promised you at the top. Write these down. You're calling your plan administrator, and that number is printed on your statement. 1. Does the plan allow partial distributions to separated participants, and how many per calendar year? 2. Is there a minimum or a maximum distribution amount? 3. Can I set up periodic payments, and can I stop or change them once they start? 4. Please send me the current summary plan description. That's the entire call. 15 minutes and you'll never have to make it again. And those 4 answers tell you whether the rule of 55 is a real option sitting in your lap or just a phrase you read on the internet. So here's your one job this week. Not a strategy, not a spreadsheet. One thing. Find your most recent 401k statement. Find the plan administrator's phone number printed on it. Make the call and ask the 4 questions. Write the answers down on the back of the statement and put it somewhere you'll find it. And get those 4 answers in hand before you sign a rollover form. That's the whole assignment. Now, I want to be clear with you, the way a good neighbor should be. Everything I've shared today is for education, to help you ask smarter questions. It is not financial, tax, or legal advice. Your situation is your own. So before you lock in a decision, sit down with a qualified professional and walk through your specific numbers. And if you've got an old 401k sitting out there somewhere from a job you left years ago, Type the word orphan down in the comments. I'd like to see how many of us are carrying one around, and it tells me what to cover next. Take care.